Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony Lamontagna, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zagi Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
So welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Peter Kelly. I'm one of your co-hosts, and I'm kindly joined by my other co-host, which is Kate. Me and Kate have known each other for a few years, haven't we, Kate?
Yeah, but we're spring chickens still, obviously.
We are spring chickens, yes. We're spring chickens with regulator heads on. Jason said not to say regulation isn't attractive, but I don't know. I'm still quite drawn to regulation, if I'm honest, as a way of getting people to do things that they should. How was your Easter?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could have 4-day weekends every week? I'm definitely up there. 3-day working weeks and 4-day weekends. That would be great. Yeah, it was really good. The usual, too much chocolate, and lots of downtime, which was fantastic. And you?
We went egg rolling in Preston. It's a tradition where you roll an egg down the hill, and it was very wet, so they rolled the kids down the hill. Which was, and then they made a slide, so we christened it the Avenham Slide in Avenham Park. So you can imagine about adults from around about 40 down to children about 4 throwing themselves down the side of a hill on a mud track that had been made from various different people we met before. Obviously, a dynamic risk assessment was done.
I was just about to. I mean, there's the girl, the fun girl in me is like, that sounds like great fun, and then the part of me is going, oh, that would make for an interesting risk assessment.
It was. It's definitely not. It wasn't in any risk assessment I can add. But there you go. So they were sort of responsible for themselves. But yeah, it's one of those. Anyway. We're going on a bit, aren't we? Yeah, anyway, we've got a wonderful guest today. A wonderful guest who I've met at a few conferences, had the privilege of having dinner with you as well. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Hi, Kate. Nice to meet you. I am interested in this egg rolling down the hill, though, realistically, and why you maybe didn't do it, Peter. I mean.
I'm a bad back, so yeah, so I have a bad back, and I did quite a dynamic risk assessment and thought, no, it's not good for me.
Yeah, it's probably wise at this time of life. But pleasure to be with you both. I'm Stuart, and I would say that I'm somebody who's making a career within the workplace health and wellbeing space. I actually graduated with a health and fitness science background and worked in health clubs for the first part of my career in my 20s, managing a couple of premium health clubs in London, which gave me an understanding to commerciality, profit and loss, people management and people leadership and what have you, and looked to move out of that when I left to go travelling. And when we came back, me and my wife came back, I kind of fell into recruitment as everyone does, realistically. Two of the managers I worked with within the health clubs set up a startup recruitment agency, and asked if I'd work for them for 2 weeks, and ended up staying 7 or 8 years. And that gave me a real insight into relationships and understanding motivation of people within a working environment, and it culminated into about a career for 16 to 17 years. I moved into internal recruitment, which is more around about stakeholder management, account management, and really looking at driving decisions with data. But it also gives you an insight to the ugly side of organisations as well. And when you're sitting in HR departments, you can really see the power struggles within companies, the egos that are at play, and how indispensable people are, as opposed to trying to fix issues that are in organisations. So there is a real dark side to recruiting. I'm probably stayed in that industry 3 or 4 years too long. And when I was presented with an opportunity in 2020, just before COVID, when I was presented with an opportunity to leave due to a merger, I kind of took that opportunity to leave recruitment, and that culminated in a situation where, as I said, this was February, March 2020, and this culminated in a situation where my wife became very, very sick from a mental health point of view, had a breakdown and was admitted into a psychiatric ward of a hospital where she tried to take her own life. And that culminated with lockdown, where no one in, no one out, and kind of gave me a sort of a realization around what can happen. And I was brought up in the UK in the 70s and 80s. The attitude then, and still it was really at that time, was you just got to get on with things. And I had an opportunity or a choice then to really understand what was going on, and equip myself with the skills and the knowledge to try and support my wife, which I did. And that was to start with looking at a mental health first aid course, which I did for my own personal reasons, to try and understand and try to deal with the situation that we found ourselves in. My wife did come out of hospital, and she did look to go back to work, and that actually only made things worse. And realistically, I was then looking at how I was treated in my previous role, and how my wife work situation was playing out through no fault of anybody's, specifically. I really thought actually there are issues here within working within organisations as to how people are treated, and obviously with that recruitment aspect, and how easy it is just to brush things under the carpet and not tackle real challenges and issues happening in the organisation. I thought this was an area to move myself into. Got myself enrolled in a few NEBOSH courses, and then found myself on a master's course with the excellent Jonathan Hootmont up at Nottingham University. And I'm just coming to the end of a 3-year research degree, which is a master's of Science in Workplace Health and Wellbeing, or in old money, as you would know, Peter, Occupational Health Psychology. And throughout that period, I've had some employment where I worked for Vitality, the life and health insurance company, in their Vitality at Work arm of their business, which was really, really enjoyable. But unfortunately, after a short period of time, I was made redundant. And most recently, in fact, only a couple of weeks I have become the Occupational Health and Wellbeing Lead at Skansa.
Brilliant.
Thank you
very new.
so much for kind of sharing your journey to where you are now. I mean, I think our listeners we all come to, I think, an understanding or a passion or an interest for psychological health and safety in the workplace for varying different reasons. So it's really great to hear yours and your context. So thank you so much for sharing. That's really interesting dynamic. To come from kind of the world of physical health and well-being, and that journey then looking to actually some of the fundamental issues that we face in the workplace. And if you consider how much time we spend in the workplace, the challenges that can present.
Yeah, absolutely. And with recruitment, the aspect to it is that clearly, when you're in the role that I was in, managing staff as well, but there's an element there of not only managing stakeholders and what goes on within organisations, but you're talking to people, candidates daily who want to leave where they're at, where they're working. They're in pain. They don't like where they work, and it's a world of actually maybe the grass is greener, but it's a world of actually people who are dissatisfied with their work. And I've worked it out. I must have interviewed over 10,000 candidates in my recruitment career, and a question I would certainly ask is, have you tried to resolve the situation as to why you're leaving? And I would say 85 to 90% of the time it was a yes, and the organisations chose to look the other way, and wouldn't, really deal with scenarios that had come up at work. And generally, it was psychosocial. Generally, it was around relationships, it was around the type of work, it was around compensation, instability, and you're in that environment where, when yes, you want, there's an upside to recruitment. Clearly, you are offering people an opportunity to train, to progress or change their career, which is great. And when you offer somebody a job, you do feel really, really happy, and you get a good dopamine hit from that. But for every person you're saying yes to, you're probably saying no to 2, or if not 3. And there are times when I know that I've laid awake at night, knowing that somebody is desperate to get out of where they're working, and I've got to deliver bad news to them. Say, unfortunately, I can't help you in terms of your next step, and you've got to sort of continue to tolerate where you are. So it's been there throughout the career with regards to, and I've always had that interest in psychology, but it's been there throughout the career with regards to how to try and help and understand what's going on within organisations, and where you can then best help the employees of that organisation. So as I say, when I started my masters and started to look at frameworks and theory and what have you, it was a real eye opener where I could look back on my career and go, do you know what, I see that, I've seen it happen time and time again. And there was almost some sort of validation as to my thinking as to what I'd observed.
Yeah, you started your journey without realising you were on a journey, and I guess that element of how do we deliver bad news? How do we we know how to deliver good news, but how do we deliver bad news? And that's part of, particularly in the cost of living crisis and the which is a renaming of a recession. Let's call it what it is. It's a recession. These conversations need to be had and are being had, and we need to be getting better at supporting people through these fundamental changes. But so in your experience, Stuart, do companies change well when it comes to moving people on, or is it more because are they all bad? I guess.
No, I can't. We can't really think that it is, and we've got to have hope that they're not. Clearly, I've worked with some great companies, and some not so great companies. But you do find people will move on from their employer because they've outgrown the role, or they need that new challenge, or what have you. But I think fundamentally a lot of it does come down to culture. There are certain microclimates of that within organisations, and how people are treated. But no, I think we'll probably find there's a bell curve of great companies at one end of that curve, and not so at the other end, and in between you've got ones that are okay, and some people love them and some people don't, and they try hard, but I do think that sometimes there's also a way of dealing with people when they are leaving an organisation with regards to how that affects them from a psychological point of view as well, and how people are exited from a business can make a huge difference. Whether they've chosen to resign, or whether they're made redundant, or even if it's gross misconduct. I do think that makes a huge difference on that individual with regards to how they perceive the world of work, and actually do their employer, who they could have made lots of profit for, do they really care about what they've done in the past? And I do think when we start looking at data and we start looking at issues in organisations, the attitude of, well, we're not going to do an exit interview, because, well, we're not going to get the truth, or people are just going to be bitter and twisted. But that is actually an opportunity to gain some really, really good data. And even if you don't believe it, it still needs to be investigated, because there is somebody in that organisation who's feeling a certain way. And you may not believe it, but that's qualitative data is important to as I say, to investigate and to take on board, and see if actually there's something is behind that.
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the Flourish DX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow Flourish DX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities, or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the Flourish DX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
So I suppose a comment and then a follow-up question from me, thinking about your history and experience.
Hey, you're not allowed to.
Oh yeah, it's a comment and a question. So I'm framing my question. So I think one of the things I've always found very interesting, in the different roles that I've had, is how the HR department are perceived. And I think for a lot of individuals, they consider that the HR department is there to help and support them. But the reality is that the HR department is there to protect the organisation. So I suppose thinking about what you've experienced and things like your comments about exit interviews and perhaps, although you don't want to get into details, how do you think HR departments need to evolve or get involved in this process to really drive change?
Yeah, it's a good question, Kay, and I think they're a part of driving change, and I don't think it's totally reliant on HR. I think, again, culturally, depending on how HR is perceived within an organisation, will sort of I think result in how well that organisation can look at driving change. But I would agree with the comment that HR are there to protect an organisation, and they probably do more harm than good when that happens. I think to an individual and into the justice within the organisation, and how that ripples out throughout companies. But in terms of looking at HR driving change, I think there need to be backing up what's happening across the organisation. And if people are going to them for help, that message needs to be consistent. But it needs to pull together, the different strands and the different aspects within different departments as to why or what's happening, and be open and transparent about how they can look to make a difference. But yeah, I think HR shouldn't necessarily be the only responsible department for change, and certainly when we're looking for psychosocial change, it's certainly you need your champions in the business to be driving change, and whoever they may be, however senior they may need to be. But I do think you then need to pinpoint where who those people in the organisation are and how you go best about influencing them to support what you're looking to do. The concern I have with HR is yes, people will go to them for help, and they think they are going to be able to change a lot of things within the organisation when actually they don't necessarily have that power to do so, or the skill set. And that's sometimes a little bit concerning, certainly when you're finding health and wellbeing is being bolted on to HR departments and almost told just to get on with it and make sure that we're compliant if that's the case, or we're doing what we think we should be doing. And to me then it becomes secondary and actually not really a primary objective for the organisation.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. It's not just HR. But I think particularly for psychological health and safety, they're such an important part of the picture. But often there isn't that engagement. So I was very curious to hear your reflections. Thank you.
And I think, Kate, that bodes well, and hopefully, Stuart, you'll have learnt this on your master's course. But Prochaska and De Clementine's model on stages of change talks about pre-contemplation and contemplation. There's 4 elements to it, but concentrating on those, many people in management are contemplating why they need to change. And many people that are in non-management grades are what they call pre-contemplation. They don't know why they need to change. There's risks and there's roadblocks and there's rewards and the 5 R's that come into it. Because it's interesting what you were saying there. It's actually when you look at change and you look at it in a structured way, you'll find it gets better. I mean, both me and Kate will have had examples where we've gone to really poorly managed change and we've had to issue notices because somebody, hasn't actually thought through the consequences of those changes. But if we did do change properly, it would be better. And which I think brings me to this question, you're swimming along in this career of things that you're doing, and then you throw yourself into a master's. What would you? Also in lockdown, by the way. Well done.
Yeah.
Did lockdown prompt you to do it, or was it something in your brain beforehand when you were going?
Yeah, I think there was an element, Pete, of. So I did a little bit of pro bono work, as I call it, for a startup online therapy company during the lockdown, and I was sitting on meetings with decision makers around who was going to decision makers for workplace health and wellbeing strategies or initiatives or interventions or whatever it was, and I didn't think I had the influence or confidence to be able to help that person make an informed decision. I had in health and fitness, and I had in recruitment. So I felt I needed to go and get myself qualified. So I did some investigations into it and see what's out there. There isn't a lot. In fact, it's paltry. It really is. And all roads led to looking at doing the masters, and the first question was, in my own mind, I'm stoked for 25 years. Can I commit, and actually will I be any good at it? And then you start scratching away a little bit further and digging into it. It's probably, I would say it's up there in the top 5 best decisions I've made in my life. And I am thoroughly enjoying it, more so than I thought I would. I am going to be missing it hugely when I submit my research paper in July. Some of the cohort, who were the year ahead, we're still in touch. It was something which I thought, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. And if I'm going to commit to this career, then this is something I've got to do. And I do really think, and I'm biased, and for the obvious reasons, but I do think it's probably the gold standard in the country at the moment, if not across the globe, with regards to the level of competency that you require, the level of confidence, the knowledge that you gain, the resources available, and how practical and how I suppose how it allows you to think critically around what needs to happen within an environment and an organisation, and how to deliver that and influence in the right ways. But it's utilising evidence-based, it's peer-reviewed theories and frameworks. It's bringing that academic aspect to and a level, as I say, that level of maturity to organisations, which does need to be, in a sense, watered down, and you've got to meet people where they're at. So you've got to be creative with regards to how you're delivering the message and who your audience is. But I remember our first induction, or our first session, which was an induction, and it was unfortunately it had to be done by Zoom. And I think we all came away thinking, "Wow, this is going to be something that we didn't think it was going to be in terms of the level of, I suppose, the level of thoroughness." But after our first sort of briefing on our first module, I was put at had no qualms, given lots of confidence that we were all going to get through this, and we do, and it was it still is thoroughly enjoyable.
And you had some excellent guest lecturers as well, didn't you?
We did, and that's the thing, though, Peter. I mean, I know you're saying that because I know you're a big advocate for the course and you help us out. But it's you get access to people who you probably wouldn't have done, and listen to them talk, and then you're starting to find yourself talking in those circles, and that environment that you then find yourself working in just kind of raises your level of expectation, and that phrase when the tide rises, all the boats rise, and you've got yourself, obviously. There's we had Gail Kingsman, who helped us with one of our modules. You had the likes of Charles Alberts come and do a chat for us. We've had Ray Randall, we had Stephen Davis, Sean Davis, should I say, who's at Belmont at the moment. The wonderful people at Affinity, Rachel Lewis and Joe Yorker, coming in and having some chats with us. And they're the ones just off the top of my head. It's certainly something where you kind of get these researchers and these people who have done the course before. You kind of get stage fright when you have that opportunity to chat with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nottingham has been leading on psychological health and safety for years, so I think it's fantastic to have the grounding. I suppose, listening to kind of your journey and thinking about our listeners, I was curious. You hinted to influencing senior leadership. What are your thoughts? What are your takeaways? How are you going to approach that critical subject?
Well, sure, yeah, and this is, I think it is critical, and I think a lot of it's a big question. And I think it's an obvious question.
We've only got
Yeah.
I mean, solve everybody's, solve all the problems in the world in 5 minutes.
Well, the thing is, I come from a place, Kate, of what if we don't do it? So I suppose I've been in that environment where I've seen bad sides to organisations. Yes, it's good size, but what I've found, I've been saying to heads of health and safety and wellbeing in Skansa is, I'm coming from this from a point of view of work will damage you. Work is not, at some point, is not going to be good for you. We know, yes, obviously there's some good sides, and work is good for us, and we want people to thrive, and that's utopian. That's where we want to get to. But I haven't yet spoken to anyone, and I'm a hoot at dinner parties, but I yet haven't spoken to somebody who has not experienced trauma at some point throughout their career caused by work. And obviously, with my wife, that's something that, as I said, hasn't helped, and myself. So I come from it from a point of view of we're going to damage people, we're going to hurt people. So therefore, what are we going to do to stop that? And in a sort of a diplomatic way is to look at how this is our responsibility as an organisation to do something about it. Because what if we don't do anything about it? We can't do nothing. Well, we can, but this is the consequences. So morally, we've got to be doing something about this. Now, here's the data, here's the science, here's the evidence. I can give you all sorts of stats, but I'm going to start looking at, or we're going to start looking at what's happening in our organisation, what the issues are in our organisation, and then this is how I think we should look to start to influence from a point of view of what if we don't do it? What if we just stand still? And I think it's a case of identifying the issues and identifying the problems with a view of how do we then look to solve them from, as I say, from that aspect of potentially loss aversion as opposed to what you gain. And I've got a bit of a bugbear when we start talking about ROI in this industry, because we shouldn't be looking after people's health and well-being because of the return we're going to get from it, the rate of return we're going to get from it from a financial point of view. Realistically, it's looking at it from a point of view, if we don't do something, we're going to harm people. And we've got to be solving the problem with that aspect and with that lens. And therefore, I think how we look to influence would be, yes, we can come from it, as I say, from an evidence-based science point of view, a little bit of treacherous language in there, but we've got to start looking at engaging with people on an emotional basis as to why we are legally bound to do things, but why it's actually the right thing to do. And obviously, there's going to be an upside to doing that.
Don't tell me you want to bring emotion into work, Stuart.
So a long time ago, back in the health club days, we used to use what's called an emotional sales process. And I remember the guy who came over and trained us from Australia. He looked like a vampire. And, it must have been my second year in working. And the one thing I remember he said to us is that people buy emotionally and justify it by logic. And realistically, I found that it was such a successful sales model. Hence, the reason why the health club chain became very, very successful. But I've used that throughout my career. And when I was working with Vitality, and I had clients and talked to HRDs, and coming back to Peter, why you asked me, about looking at the recruitment piece and looking at why I got into this industry. I remember talking to a HRD when I was working at Vitality, and coming back to the point you made about why I took the masters and me feeling comfortable and confident. It was, I remember talking to a HR director at Vitality when I was working for Vitality for one of my clients, and there was such a harshness and such a sort of barrier. And I had to break that down. I had to get beyond that and find out why that was. And it was a personal issue, which, over time built trust with that person and actually found out more about them and more about why they're taking on Vitality. And once I've got over that, once I've made it, dare I say, emotional and personal, the client just flew. The engagement was the greatest engagement we've seen for our clients since we started the Vitality at Work program, etc., etc. So, I do think it's an important aspect.
Getting to know people, getting to know how people function.
And sorry to interrupt you there, Peter, but I think on that piece, it is important actually, because one of the modules we looked at in Masters was around sort of behavioural theories. And I do think organisations don't look into that enough. And I know there's a lot of sort of, you can do your personality charts and get your colours and what have you, but when you start looking at theory, you spoke there about the trans-theoretical model or the stages of change theory. I mean, that is a theory that if you start looking at that towards communication with an organisation, you can have such a difference. But it is looking at what drives that intent, what drives that behaviour, where are those beliefs within the individual and within those organisations. And when you come back to looking at change, and whether that's within HR or whatever other department it is, humans are driven by certain intents and certain behaviours and certain beliefs. But I do find organisations really don't want to delve into that, and therefore they're going to get little change from when they do want to implement something. When people are being told, and we don't understand our people's behaviours, and we don't understand their intent and their behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. The good old psychological contract, Kate. Remember when we used to talk about that? When we used to talk about the psychological contract.
To be honest, I still do. I think it's, it's concepts have been around for a long time, but, understanding needs and expectations and having a conversation about what those look like, and then seeing where you align and where there is divergence seems like a really simplistic thing to me. And yet, it doesn't happen, and it's so odd. There's so many assumptions made that I think a lot of this could be easily resolved if we just had a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to your point, Kate, I mean, you're not wrong. You in fact, you're right. And I just there came the point where, coming back to my sort of story with my wife, there came a point where I had a choice to make. I could have sort of said, pull your big girl pants up and get on with it, and not believe her mental state, and look the other way, or I could do something about it. And it may be controversial to say, and obviously I'm conscious of my employers and what have you, but this is not anything to do with them, but organisations do look the other way, and there is a lot of theory, there's a lot of law, and there's a lot of thinking which is not new. And when you look at Carrick sex theory, that's 1979 for God's sake, and the trans-theoretical theory and Segrist, reciprocity theory, they last century, and yet these things are around, and organisations don't choose to engage with actually what we know. And that, to me, is the biggest frustration at the moment. Is we know this stuff, but we are choosing to look the other way, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it's one of it's why I've stayed in this career, and I've always been so focused in this area, because I've always found it so odd that somehow when we go into the workplace, we leave our humanity at home.
Kate, that's my line.
Wow, we might have to go back through the reels and decide who said that one first.
Indeed. Yeah, I mean, Stuart, you're officially in geek territory if you can actually name Karasek and transactional models. So I'll give you that. I nod to your geekness. You've joined the squad. At this point, because we're just coming to the end, what we normally ask is our people that are on here, what would be one thing you wanted to tell your audience? And if you had a younger self, what would you tell yourself now?
Yeah, I would have told my younger self.
All briefly.
Yeah, no, I would have told my younger self to read more. I wasn't the greatest academic growing up. School was a bit of a chore, a bit of a giggle. And yeah, whilst there was an element of intelligence somewhere in me, I suppose I lived by. Throughout lockdown, I picked up a book my wife was reading, and I found for the next 4 years I've read and listened to a lot of books. Clearly, for your masters, you've got to do a lot of reading, but I would learn more, take more action, stay curious, be curious, ask questions, keep asking questions. Don't necessarily be satisfied with the first answer, because it's generally not the truth. And I learned that throughout recruitment. When I'd ask people why they're leaving, they'd give me a reason. 20 minutes later, I'd ask again, it's a different reason. So yeah, it's really keep asking why. And when we're children, we ask it, and throughout our adulthood and we're growing up, we tend not to ask it. So I'll tell my younger self is to be more curious, keep asking why, and read more, learn more, and then how do you look to manifest that into competent communication that people understand?
Yeah, I think the communication thing is so important, Stuart. I mean, I'm dyslexic and have ADHD, so my mind's super active, but I'm not very good at writing. And I hate reading, but I've done it because I've found something that's triggered a passion in me. I must admit, I don't read this thick books. I try and go for the thinner ones. And then the internet was an absolute savior, really, because then you could go in, you could see videos or find source material, etc. So yeah, I think it's brilliant that you come on this journey, and and actually all of your life experiences come along, and then you bring them into the world of psych health and safety, and that's a great thing, isn't it, Kate? That we're getting people who've got these life experiences who can then interpret the world of work in a psychologically safe and psychological health and safety way. We begin to understand that actually there's a better way of doing work and keeping people psychologically healthy and safe. So thank you very much for coming on to this podcast. And I will finish with the usual directions. Please go on to whichever format that you have to listen to the podcast. If you feel so overwhelmed that you want to see us on video, please go to YouTube. We'll be up on YouTube as well. And all that leaves me to do is to say thank you very much and bye for now. Let's give everyone a wave for those on YouTube.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow Flourish DX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychhealthandsafety.com.